The following episode of the Comics and Crypto podcast is for informational purposes only, and anything expressed by the hosts or their guests is solely their opinion. This podcast does not constitute financial advice, and anyone wishing to invest should seek their own independent financial or professional help. Have fun and enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Sean O'Hare, and I know comics.
Hi, I'm Spencer Vogel, and I know crypto.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee Loader, and I don't know shit. This is the Comics and Crypto podcast.
Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, collectors world in a digital age. Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, it's where the next billionaires will be made. It's comics and crypto.
Today, we have a very special guest, a master collector and one of the most popular content creators in the collectible space with 1.8 million followers on TikTok alone. Please welcome the Collectible Guru himself, Eric Whiteback. Eric, what's up, bud?
Hey.
Yo, what's going on, guys?
Thanks for coming on.
Welcome.
Yeah, of course. Excited to be here. I mean, it's rarely that I have someone that has a background that marvels mine, but I see a few things back there that are pretty cool.
Yeah, we're working on it. It's a work in progress for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited to dig into some stuff today.
Oh, our pleasure, man. It's been really fun watching your content. It's you have really good content.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Look, I do it full time, so I have no excuses, man. It's got to be good stuff when I put it out there. So
I love it.
yeah, it's fun. And it's you guys know this. It's really helpful when you work in a category that you really, really love, right? And the collectibles to me and all these different cards, comics, video games, you name it, the stuff, I eat this stuff up. I enjoy it like crazy. And so while there's certainly a part of what I do that feels like work, the fact that I get to work with things that I really love makes it that much easier.
Definitely feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Has your journey taken you into different collectibles and different obsessions over time?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, look, it wasn't day one where I'm like 6 years old and I'm like, I'm going to collect everything ever, right? Like,
yeah.
It started when I was young and the first love was baseball cards. I was at the 2000 All-Star Fan Fest as a 4-year-old. And when my dad worked at Hershey Foods, they sponsored the event. And so like when you're a 4-year-old walking around with like the little, sponsor badge, like everyone's just handing you packs of cards. Like, take this, take this, take this. And so, it was like, early Upper Deck MVP sets, metal, like Fleer Tradition and like all these sets that I have all this nostalgia with because people were just like giving me free packs when I was a young kid. And that was how it started. And, my dad's from South Jersey. We grew up in central Pennsylvania. So we're Philly sports fans.
I'm from outside Philly as well. Yeah,
nice.
From Bluebell. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that. Yeah, but we're like Philly sports fans through and through. So for me, it started early 2000s is I was born in 96. So I was 4 years old at the Fan Fest. And like back then, early 2000s, it was pretty much baseball cards or bust. There wasn't like this huge market around basketball and these other sports. So I was pretty much collecting Phillies cards. I was collecting Phillies cards, like trying to get autographs of every player that had a certified autograph card. And that was like that. I didn't start like, video games, comics, NFTs, whatever. It was just like, I like Phillies baseball cards and it's any collectible category is a little bit of a gateway drug, I say, right? Like if you really enjoy collecting, you'll probably find other things to collect along the way. And that's certainly what I've done.
Yeah, the sports card market is what got me into collecting in the first place as well. I mean, going especially through the 90s and being obsessed with Beckett's and just tearing Beckett's apart, speculating on players. I was just falling in love with this. I never even no one really taught me. I just kind of just learned it on my own. And it wasn't until like 1999 when Mark McGwire was going after or 98 when he's going after the home run record. And that's when I knew I need to get his rookie card, get a couple of them. And then towards the end of the season, I flipped him.
Well, you're probably smart. Those are like one of the few cards that might be worth less now than they actually were.
Exactly.
Then, right?
Yeah.
So smart of you to flip those. But yeah, I know there's a whole lot of fun there. And, I was the kid too, just like going to card shows on weekends and finding stuff for $3 that I could flip for $5. And I'm like, 10 years old, like, oh, this is the best. Awesome. A passion was born from that for sure. And I know what it's like to flip through the Beckett monthlies and the tough stuffs and all that stuff and trying to, find the next edge or find the next guy or whatever it is. And there's 100 ways to sort of have fun in cards. There's 100 ways to try to sort of profit in cards, and some of those things overlap. And you definitely know that, well, that's a great gateway to get into other things for sure. It's one of the collectible categories too. Like, you sort of look behind you and you've got VHS, you've got video games, you've got comics. These are things that have other utility outside of collecting, but cards are sort of a unique one where it's like, they're not meant for anything except really collecting. That's one of the interesting things too, with all these categories right now. I'm not sure. Like I hear people like, Cards are just like manufactured scarcity. It's like, you want something that, like isn't intended to be a collectible. I like collecting things that are intended to be collected. And I see both sides of that coin. I think each of those things presents a really sort of unique advantage.
Yeah. And you're talking about like trading, like I basically grew up on trading cards, like more like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, which those actually did have utility. And there you go.
Yo!
They did have some utility, yeah.
And that you could actually play the games. And like I as a kid, like I would go to like my local card shop, and they had tournaments in the back, and I'd be like the one like elementary school kid like playing against like middle-aged men and like playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and parental supervision, of course.
That's
but
awesome.
like,
dude, I'm trying to get into Magic the Gathering. It's like I just like think that's like one of the cooler, stronger communities that I know very little about as it relates to trading cards. This is like, this is from I think I got this. I like know where I was when I got this, like the Harrisburg Mall. Got a pack of cards. Like this is the one Pokemon card I kept all these years, and you can see like I shredded it, so it's like a PSA 4. But it's like this could be worth $10,000. I wouldn't sell it, right? Because it's just like so nostalgic.
It's sentimental, yeah.
It is really interesting. You talk about sort of the utility within collectibles and how they can drive value. In Pokemon you see it some, right? I think like if you talk about the people that buy and collect Pokemon cards, probably like 95% of them don't play the trading card game.
Yeah.
But then like you switch to Magic and it's almost the opposite, right? Like probably 95% of collectors play the game pretty religiously. And there's everything in between, right? You have like your MetaZoos and your Yu-Gi-Ohs and your Dragon Ball Zs and all these other TCGs, but it's like I think those are two very clear different ends of the spectrum. Is like you have your Pokemon where people almost exclusively collect, and they play the game some, but it's more about collecting at least for the cards. And then for the cards in Magic, it's like it's almost all about the utility and the history of the cards as opposed to almost everyone there is playing the game. So yeah, very interesting stuff.
I'm really glad that you brought up the artificial scarcity. Because we actually we interviewed Ashley Cairns, who's the new head of comics over at Golden. Awesome guy. And he was talking about that, the artificial scarcity, because NFTs and digital collectibles are kind of in the same category. But it's interesting for the sports card market. Man, it's not stopping. And I didn't realize until recently. Big shout out to my friend Will. He reintroduced me to the sports card market, and my mind was blown. I couldn't believe the packs that people are paying 10 grand for one card for like National Treasures and Panini.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? This is wild.
There is your sort of intuition there. It's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And like part of that natural intuition is like very correct. There is a lot of stuff going on in the sports card industry that I find to be very illogical. I do think that, like you said, like a lot of these National Treasures packs where it's just a couple cards and it's $8,000 or $10,000, like those things are dramatically overpriced. And then you look at like the expected value return when you actually open some of these boxes, and a lot of these high-end products that are coming out today, the expected value return on opening them is like 20 to 30% the value of the box. That is unsustainable, right? That's unsustainable. And it's driven by there's some breakers that do a really good job sort of upselling some of the stuff, and then you have this situation too where there's like a couple big chase cards that people are just like, oh my gosh, yeah, like there's a good chance I lose $1,000 here if I buy into the break, but there's $1 million card in this product, right? And like I want to go for that. And so there's all sorts of interesting things going on. And there's manufactured scarcity, right? Which I think we see today in a lot of the products, which manufactured scarcity does not scare me. What scares me is the amount and to the level to which they do it, right? And so I would say like, modern base cards are not places where I would store capital for the most part, right? And then you even look at like a lot of numbered cards. It's like, well, Pat Mahomes has over 2,000 different 1-of-1s, right? Like, and then how many? And you go to the numbers of 10, he probably has 5,000 cards numbered to 10 or less. Like you can't just have a card numbered to 10, right? So like you got to think. I always say it's better to have the right card of the wrong player than the wrong card of the right player. And so you could look at like these old PMG sets where if 2 years ago you bought a green PMG of a precious metal gem card limited to 10, it's an iconic set in the sports card world. If you bought that card of anyone, a player that played 2 years in the league and then fizzled, that card's probably up 3-4x. Whereas if you bought a Brady card that just wasn't the right card of him, a 2012 Prism base card or something, like that card's probably down 80-90%. And so it's an interesting situation where I think within that sort of realm of manufactured scarcity, you can try to find the sets that you think will be important long-term. And that's probably an easier thing to figure out than the players that are going to be important long-term, particularly when you're looking, these young rookies and things like that. And so a lot of what I've done in cards is not so much like, oh, hey, I'm going to try and chase a rookie of all these top 100 players. It's like, there's a couple sets that I feel really strongly about, and I'll buy any player in those sets. And so, that's definitely the way that I've thought about some of that manufactured scarcity. And it's, there's a lot of prices I see today where I'm like, man, people can buy that card at a 60% discount from a year ago, and that's a great card. And there's a lot of cards I see today where I'm like, that card's down 60%, needs to go down another 96%, right? and everything in between. But there's certainly this interesting thing in cards too, where you have your modern manufactured scarcity, but you go back and the scarcity isn't so much around the card itself, it's around the condition of the card. So it's not so much the like you look at a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, that card is not overly rare in and of itself. If you just want any grade, it's going to be relatively expensive in any grade, but you look at the sort of multiple between like a PSA 1 and a PSA 10, and it's like 1000x, right? So, but what makes that card rare is it's a condition rarity, right? So there's only 3 PSA 10s of that card in existence over the thousands and thousands of copies that have been graded. But what we have today is we don't have condition rarities today. The modern cards, there's almost no condition rarities. Now, you can talk about, should there be a multiple between a PSA 9 and a PSA 10? Like, yeah, of course there should be for modern cards, right? But, it's not like a base card's automatically rare because it's a PSA 10. And I think for some of these really rare cards, you look at green PMGs, look at gold prisms or whatever, grade is important, but certainly much less important than if the card was purely a condition scarcity as opposed to something that's a manufactured scarcity. So I don't know. That's like, we're getting down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but that's how I think about a lot of that stuff. And it's sports card world is one that I love, but it's a very interesting one. And I think some things are too hot and some things are probably too low right now too. So
I love your comparison tweets, especially like one recently, there's a couple recently that stuck out with Tim Duncan. You showed that the Tim Duncan precious metal rookie card versus
it was
versus
it's funny. I post those with like no context and people get really mad. And it's like, but those are two of the traits of what makes viral content as cool and controversial. Not controversial in the way of like do something offensive, but controversial in the way of you sort of take a stand and have an interesting opinion, right? And the funny thing about those tweets is I almost always give no context. I'm never like, this means the modern's overpriced, or like this means the vintage is way too cheap. Like I don't come out and say those things explicitly.
Yeah.
But then, and this wasn't quite the case like 24 months ago when everything was on fire. It's like people who are holding things that they're not sure if they're really great and they're worried about it, then they just start attacking and going crazy. And it's like, it's a really sort of funny space. And sometimes I'll even compare like, here's, what a digital card sold for versus a physical. And like the digital and physical infighting is absurd.
Oh yeah.
And what I see, and it frustrates me to no end, because like what I see between the digital and the physical is like, you have these people, and this goes both ways, but we'll just say for the sake of this one, it's someone physical seeing something digital posted and they'll go, oh, right click, save as, screenshot. I have this now. You guys are stupid. This is all idiotic. Like, I can't believe you guys would ever pay anything for this. Right. And then what happens is the person who owns that digital item, like they're like defending themselves and digging their heels in more and more. But what the physical collector really wanted all along was to try to convince the digital collector to buy physical, because they're holding things that they want to go up in value, and to have those items go up in value, they need more physical collectors. And ironically, the action that they're taking of going after the digital collector and sort of attacking them is totally opposite to what their actual goals are of getting more physical collectors. If they would just say, oh, this is cool, it's not for me, but I appreciate that people like this stuff, then the digital collector might be like, oh, same to you. And then, 6 months down the road, some physical collector might go, you know what, I actually might try this so rare thing. Right. And then that digital collector might go, I kind of want to buy a pack of Pokemon cards and I'm at the store. Right. And like, that's the way that it should be. I view it all as like, everyone's on the same team. The pie is not finite here. We can have an expanding pie. And like, I think if, let people collect what they want to collect and let them enjoy it, and don't hate on that. Right. Like, I wish it was more of a welcoming community and less tribalism. And it's a vocal minority, I think, but it is really frustrating to me when there's that infighting between those two groups. Cause I think people are like, oh, is the future more digital or is it more physical? Is it more digital or more physical? And it's like, I think the framing of that is all wrong. I think it's more of both. I really think it's more of both, particularly in collectibles. I'm bullish on the space as a whole. And I think that more so than we will see one category being really propelled above the other, I think we're going to see them intermingled in a way that sort of blurs the lines between what is physical and digital.
We definitely believe in both. We're very excited for the future of both. And we don't look at it as a competition, especially we'll dive into a little bit more later, but like a VEVE, for example, they're dropping digital comic books. They're digital counterparts of the physicals. And we don't look at them as a competition between either. You know, they're both the same IP and they're both in high demand, and they're going to lift each other up over time. We're going to see record sales in the physical, and we believe it's going to help the digital and vice versa. But it's exciting. It's really exciting to see how it's affecting people who are never collectors in their life are collecting digital collectibles, and now they're buying physicals. Now they're going to Comic-Con events. They're going to comic book stores. I mean, I talked to multiple people. One guy in particular said, Sean, I'm 55 years old. I've never bought a comic book in my life. And I've recently spent over $100,000 in Grail comics.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's because I got into digital collectibles.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that happens. People I don't think people realize how often that happens when you have someone that collects physical that becomes interested in digital or vice versa. Like I get DMs all the time, like almost every day now. People like, hey, I haven't bought cards in a long time. I've never bought cards in my life. And it's like, you know, you have the NFT profile picture. And they're like, where should I start? What should I buy? What should I grab? And it's like, hey, look, people that get mad about digital versus physical. Yeah, I make posts about digital, but like, look, I'm bringing a bridge together. I'm trying to build a community of all collectors, not trying to make some exclusionary group of people that only collect little pictures of men on cardboard. Like, come on, let's think bigger here, people.
Yeah. Definitely. What I'm really excited about is like kind of what you're saying, like the interactions between digital and physical, and, you know, buying a digital good and then you get a physical redemption for it, or buying a physical collectible and getting a digital, and, you know, the way that those two interact. Like, I think that's probably what I'm most excited about, you know, and the way that digital collectibles are moving going forward. Cause, you know, I definitely, the physical is not being phased out. People are always going to be excited about the physical. I don't think anybody wants to go fully VR, you know, and that's one of the reasons, like we say a lot that, you know, we're really more excited about augmented reality than we are about virtual reality, because
I'm the same.
Yeah, it's a way for you to actually like interact with your physical environment, but, you know, augment it with cool virtual things that, you know, allow you to experience it in a different way. But like, I don't know, I'm not excited about like full escapism into VR personally.
Same.
Yeah, totally. And I always laugh when people are like, like digital is stupid. There's no advantage to digital. And then like they have all their physical items in a vault and they're trading them like without ever seeing them. Like you must understand, like, I'm not saying that physical or digital is better, but like there are certainly aspects of both that are positives that the other side does not have. And if you can't see that, then like your head is just in the sand in one way or another.
Yeah. 100%.
Totally agree.
So you got involved in sports cards in the very beginning. Are there any other markets that you're really excited about that we haven't discussed already?
Well, yeah, man, you can sort of see behind me here as if I don't know like how many people are watching video versus listening. But if you're watching video, you're like, well, geez, there's a big spoiler alert. Last like 20 minutes on here. But for people who are listening, maybe this will be news. I love the video game space. I'm very intrigued and enamored by it, and I can't remember if we said this off air earlier when we were on, but you know, whenever I have people over to my house, and you can see behind me, like there's a wall of all sorts of things. There's action figures, there's comics, there's video games, there's trading cards down here. There's all sorts of, you know, sports memorabilia, ticket stubs, random stuff. Right. And I will show people all the time different things from my collection. I'll show them like a card and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's cool. But like people don't have context for like what a gold prism is. People don't have context for, you know, like a certain old comic book or a first appearance, that if they aren't really in the comic space. But when they see a video game, like you think about the pervasiveness of video games into pop culture and how nostalgic people feel about them and how nostalgia can drive prices. And then there's this weird sort of aura over sealed video games that people think they're not rare, which is like, you know, categorically false. Now, you know, are they not rare for PS5 or maybe even PS4 or Switch? Like, yeah, they're not really rare there, right? You can go into your local Target and you can buy them whenever you want. But you go back a couple generations, you go back to 360, original Xbox, even PS3, but especially PS2, PS1, and anything older than that, any of like the N64, SNES, NES cardboard box games, like finding these things, one, sealed, 2, in good condition, 3, in a first print variation, is like can be almost impossible sometimes. And there are like games behind me here, like I'm gonna grab a Super Monkey Ball for GameCube, which to me is like, this was a game that like my childhood is built on. I have like thousands of hours in this game, and I swear that I still have like world records on tracks, which is probably false, but 12-year-old me thought that. And so like, you know, I was looking for this game for like probably 2 years. And you know what? I found one. And it was like completely water damaged, terrible seal, like rated like a 7.0C, which in video games, particularly for GameCube, is like a very low grade. And you know, one night I'm like sitting there scrolling, like I'm literally like, how do you find these things? I searched Super Monkey Ball on Instagram and I scrolled to like the very bottom, like 98% of the stuff was stupid. And then at the very bottom, I found a guy with a 9.8A graded Super Monkey Ball. And I was like, I messaged him. I was like, I need that. He's like, not a chance. And then I badgered him for like once a week for like 2 years straight. And finally he sold it to me. But like, there's, you know, there's like 3 or 4, maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to think. This is the single highest graded copy of this game. Maybe there's about 10 of these graded ever. But like you think about how important, like, you know, some of these games are, and this is not even that old, right? Super Monkey Ball, the original Super Monkey Ball came out for GameCube in 2001. So this isn't like some 1950s collectible. This isn't, you know, like the original Super Mario Bros. For NES. It's not that old, but yet, you know, you go to GameCube, you go to PS1, and a lot of these titles have like literally 0 copies ever graded. And so to me, when you take this sort of combination of there's really low pops, there's a trusted grading company, these things are very hard to find, they're extremely pervasive in culture, and they're very intuitive, which I think is very underrated, right? Like, you know, for people to learn cards, like you might have to spend 1,000 hours to get a sense of, you know, what's what. In video games, you can very quickly be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I played that game. That's a huge game, right?
Yeah,
like, and so, you know, when you take the sort of combination of everything going on there, it's a very young market. I tend to love those, you know, I'm partly biased because it's like what I grew up with, but those first gen disc consoles, so your PS1, GameCube, original Xbox, tend to be like very bullish on those systems based on how culturally important I think they are, how rare they are, and yet how their prices haven't quite done what NES, SNES, N64 have done. And so, you know, that's, if you want to talk about a category I'm excited about, sealed video games is definitely one. And look, man, it's stinking fun. Like when you get that sealed game that you played for like the longest time, when you
looks so good in the case
the first time, like there's games that if like I got the right game in the right grade, like I'd probably break down in tears. Like they just like, it just, you know, it takes you right back to the time, and it's so fun.
Especially for video games. When I try to explain to people the importance of this and why we believe in the market so much, video games back in the 90s, they cost the same amount as they do today. I mean, there was an advertisement we saw for N64 for Mario 64, and it would cost $60. It was advertised at $59.99. Wow. And that's crazy. So to me, I look at that, even though there are about 12, 13 million copies, you buy the game to play it. You don't buy it to store it in your closet, and especially $60 back in 1997, 96 when that game came out. That was really expensive. So you buy it to play it. Comic books, you can buy a comic book and you can enjoy it. You can read it. And if you keep it somewhere safe, you can possibly get a good grade and you know, it could be worth something. But video games, you buy them to open them, to play them. It's
very, very true. It's particularly true of these first print copies. What I mean by like a first print copy is like you know, a lot of times in these games, they'll make they'll have their original version, and it'll be like a couple little things they tweak for like, once they realize, okay, we're going to sell out of our first run, we're going to make a bunch more. Then they're like, okay, on the back of the box, it said 2 to 18 players. It's really 2 to 24 online. And then like, if we put the greatest hits label here, we know that we'll have a better sell-through rate. So like, you know, a lot of times, particularly for some of these older systems, you go back to PS1, like they're intentionally making, for games they know that are going to be successful, they're intentionally making very, very small runs of the first print copies, right? And so like, they're like, okay, hey, look, we know as soon as we sell 100,000 units or whatever the threshold is, then we can put the greatest hits label on here, and then it's going to sell way better, right? So like, you have these original Crash Bandicoot games, you can see it's got the green label on there, and that's the greatest hits version. And this is like worth, I don't know, 5%, maybe less of the original first print. And the first prints are like almost impossible to find because of that. And, you know, obviously the first print games too are like, if you're the guy going to the store the day the game comes out to buy the game, you're not leaving it in the stinking, you know, seal. Like you're opening it up and playing it right away. So yeah, well, you know, will PS5 games ever be hugely valuable? Like probably not, but that's not really what we're talking about here, right? And we're talking about before there was ever really a market established for the sealed games, no one was keeping this stuff in good condition. No one was keeping it sealed.
I look at the list, the top selling video game list of all time, and number 1 is Minecraft at like 380 million units. It's absolutely wild. But number 2 or number 3, I think, is Grand Theft Auto 5. And there's about 155 million units sold. I'm curious how many of those are digital. I wouldn't be surprised if it's about 75%.
Well, yeah, that's the interesting one. Like Fortnite too. You've maybe seen like Fortnite rated games, and it's like, easily. Well, they're very valuable and expensive, even though they're one of the most modern games that actually you know, has a market around the sealed graded game, because like they didn't really make physical copies of that game a whole lot. It was pretty much only downloaded. And it's like sort of what we see with, you know, LeBron breaking the scoring record, right? Like 2 people had physical tickets to that game that are listed on eBay. Like almost everyone else's ticket is digital, right? So like there will be some weird oddities like that. And I really do anticipate that within video games, in the same way that comics have gone with these variants. Like I fully anticipate that some of these video game companies are going to get smart and be like, okay, variant covers, like here we come, 1 in 25, 1 in 50, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, or maybe it's even like blind box, right? Where they have like a little seal around it that's the same on all of them. You break that small seal and inside is the seal of the game that has a different cover, a different color, a different something. And that's the other way that I could see, some of these modern games becoming really valuable.
One of the things I really appreciate you said around nostalgia, which I think really into one of the things that we've been really excited about collecting recently, which has been VHS and DVDs. It's the same concept with video games as it is with this, because it's, people grew up with these movies and, they associate experiences with those movies and with the content, and they spend a lot of time, really getting to know those characters. And for that reason, people I think are going to be just as excited about, things like VHS and DVD. And, so we've been really focused on stacking a lot of these recently. And our big focus has been kind of on that, the topic of variants is, screeners. So basically like, for your consideration, Academy Award screeners for big movies that, either had really big pop culture value or, actually won Academy Awards. I'm sure Sean, there you go. Sean has them right here.
I fully get it on VHS. On DVD, I get it. I'm like, I've never been the biggest like VHS DNA fan or VGA fan. I don't know, maybe this is like my old hypebeast self kicking in, and I'm like, like WADA only, PSA only, like whatever. But it's I totally get it. I totally understand it. I'm already with these things that I'm collecting. I'm like, okay, the wallet's already stretched pretty thin. I don't have too many other
you got to pick and choose.
Too fast. So like, I totally get it. I totally see the thesis. I haven't personally really bought much, if any, VHS or DVD. 2 things though that reminds me of that I've dabbled in. One is movie tickets. Funny enough, like, people know PSA for grading sporting event tickets, but they do grade the movie tickets as well. And it's they're incredibly cheap if you like just sort of are willing to sift through eBay and try and find which ones are like, oh hey, like wow, this is like the Star Wars midnight premiere, and the guy just listed like Star Wars ticket on it, right? I haven't had any like huge multi-$1,000 sales, but I just keep popping a few off, a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. And they're like, they're ones I get for $5 and grade for 30. And I found some old cool ones, right? Like I have the Rocky IV opening night movie ticket. I have an original Jaws opening night movie ticket, some like Indiana Jones, old Star Wars movies, opening nights and midnight premieres. And recently found a Taxi Driver ticket. And I think that's like if you're looking for a really cheap entry point into something that you can like buy, make a few bucks on, enjoy the nostalgia around, I think movie tickets are fun. I don't know if that'll ever be like a massive category, but it seems like one right now where it's limited risk, pretty cheap, and not that hard to flip things for a little bit of a profit if you're really willing to sift through and look at all the dates and do all the research on that. The movie category reminds me of just like another category that I think is totally underdeveloped right now. And if someone really wanted to be patient and play a long game, could probably make a lot of money on, which is music, right? Like think about the music category. It's another category. Like you hear the right song, the right time, it like transports you to a time and place, just like a video game, just like a VHS, just like a movie, whatever it is. Right. And so, but I could totally see like, original CDs for certain artists, cassette tapes, vinyl records. Now, there's some market around vinyl records, of course, already, but like what happens when there's a legitimate trusted grading company that does VHS, cassette, CD, and then maybe even starts grading like some Apple products like the iPhone and iPod and things like that. And so, I don't know exactly what WADA's roadmap is. I know there's plenty of video games they haven't gotten to yet. Like I know they haven't done PSP yet. They haven't done PC yet, which I think is a big sort of sleeping giant in video games is PC. So you can see behind me, I've got like my roller coaster tycoons, my pajamas.
I saw that. Those were really big.
Freddy fishes. Yeah. And look, dude, I've been like every sealed copy of Roller Coaster Tycoon I've seen in the last 36 months I've bought. Like, it's not that many. So, it'll be interesting. I imagine that there will probably like after WADA clears all the different video games, after they get PSP and PC and whatever other ones they're missing that I'm not even coming up with off the top of my head, then maybe they move into VHS, maybe they move into DVD and Blu-ray. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but I don't know that I'm totally with you that there's still a lot of developing to do around a lot of this really, really important IP that doesn't have like a very, developed market yet.
Yeah, IGS actually announced recently that they've already started doing it, grading cassette tapes and vinyls and laser discs. And VGA has also announced that they're going to start the home grading authority.
What do you guys think? Let me ask you candidly. What do you think of VGA?
I think they're an amazing company and they have a wonderful leadership. The grading system is a little bit difficult to process, but once you understand it, it actually makes a lot of sense. But again, it's just kind of tough to grade when I'm used to like CGC or CBCS, the 9.8 grading scale. But it's a cool company and they are run by an amazing team.
It's probably like the old SGC grading model, which I still don't even know. They're like, this card's a 90. I'm like, what? Like,
the Mantle still for 12.6.
Yeah, no. They switched the scale now. They have like the quote unquote normal scale now. They have the 10-point scale now.
They got rid of the 9.5.
Well, they have the 9.5 still, which is normal, but like they used to grade on like some really weird, like 100-point or something scale that was really different. And I was like, this is a 40 VG3. I'm like, whatever that means. VGA. I will say though, like the thing I don't like about them is I feel like they grade everything, and they're like in some capacity they're like a custom acrylic company, and it's like because like there's VGA, but then there's like DCA, which is like the diecast authority, and there's AFA, which is the action figure authority, and it's like I don't know how much I trust their ability to authenticate some of these items and know what's original seal or resealed and not. And even like they're like they'll do a Hot Wheel, they'll do like a loose Lego minifigure. It's like at some point I'm kind of like, do I trust them to do all these things, or are they just sort of like grading many different things that exist and trying to go really, really wide in all these categories and be like a mile wide and an inch deep, as opposed to the other way around?
Spreading yourself thin. I will say that they're one of the first. I think they're the first to grade action figures, but also one of the first to grade video games as well. I think they're actually the first company to do it.
Yeah, I think they are too. So like, yeah, I mean, I'm not like screw VGA. I just that's my hesitation with them for sure. And it's like, am I tempted to send a bunch of my PC stuff to VGA because they actively grade it? Yeah, but I'm also like, I'd rather wait till WATA grades it personally.
We're definitely going to see, I believe we're starting to hear like CGC is potentially going to get involved in the VHS space. So definitely, these companies are definitely going to keep spreading out as the demand grows.
Yeah, that's totally true. It's a very much like dog eat dog world there right now, and it's all the competition is good. The consumer benefits from the competition. At the end of the day, you get lower prices, you get better service, you get new services. And so, I mean, dude, you look at like the grading landscape 10 years ago versus today, it's like it's come a long, long way, and we'll say the same thing another 10 years from now.
Yeah, and I think it's going to continue to grow, especially as things become more and more digital. And that's why, like for movies, I mean, how much longer are we really going to see Blu-rays in stores? Probably not very much longer. And same with video games. As our hard drives expand, we get 10, 20, 30, 50 terabyte hard drives on our PS5s. Are we going to have any physicals anymore? Probably not. And it's a lot cheaper for these companies to sell too. And that's another reason why I believe in the video game market, the greater video game market, because as these things stop selling in stores, these are going to become more and more nostalgic and
relics of the past.
Relics of the past.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Pop culture at its finest. We don't see a lot of sales for these grails in their highest grades. It's very, very uncommon. Some of them have never even sold, like Fantastic Four #1. There's only 2 9.6s, and that's the highest grade. And there's never been a sale, even from a recession. It doesn't matter because people with deep pockets are going to want that, and they're going to FOMO into that.